Welcome to this Last Mile Profits video, the last word on the last mile. How does the out-of-home delivery market look like in Japan? Stay tuned to find out more.
Modern Expo provides an integral ecosystem of screen-operated lockers, screenless autonomous solutions, refrigerated lockers, and even personal parcel lockers, powered by in-house developed software.
Gary, so today we are going to move to the land of the rising sun. It's a really cool one because I know very, very little. Yeah, I'm admitting it. I know very, very little about the out-of-home market there.
Well,
so
I'm very relieved we've
us?
actually recorded that statement because that's a first in itself. But Quadient have got something in common with the great German one-hit wonder band Alphaville, is that we are big in Japan.
So tell us then, if you were to sort of share with us the key, I would say, idiosyncrasies, what makes Japan special or different in out-of-home, what would they be?
Well, if I tell you a little bit of the history of setting up the network there, it's a joint venture with Yamato, which is the number 2 carrier after Japan Post. They're absolutely enormous. Their volumes dwarf any of the kind of single European carriers in a country. They're massive. The original plan was to deal with failed first-time delivery. Their customer service is really, really high with Yamato. They will deliver again and again and again until they find somebody in. They found that was too expensive. So originally, the idea was to put lockers on street corners. You failed the first time delivery or the second time delivery, come and collect from the locker. We expected 80% of the volume to come from there. Everybody was flat out wrong. 70% of the volume that goes through these 7,000 lockers in Japan that we have, 4,500 of them in Tokyo alone, 70% of the volume is C2C.
Cool. And they make a lot of sense because C2C, in either the item value is low or the ability of the shipper to pay is low, certainly versus the sort of prices they'd send for a single shipment. So that works a lot. And then you mentioned something in an earlier discussion we had that re-commerce is pretty big there. And that would also imply that there's a huge opportunity for lockers.
Yeah, so the stat about Japan that always absolutely blows my mind is returns, and that's including apparel and all this sort of thing, sits around 1% of e-commerce, 1 to 2% of e-commerce. That's a tenth, less than a tenth of many other sort of developed markets. And I was intrigued why this was. So I spoke to my Japanese colleagues to try to understand. And basically, to make a return, you're doing one of two things. You're either admitting that you've made a mistake, and Marek, we know how uncomfortable that is even for you, or you're accusing the retailer of selling you something that was either incorrect or of not good quality. And culturally, neither of these things sit well in Japan. So instead of returning, they will resell that item, aim to get 60% or 70% of the original sale value, and that's driven an absolutely phenomenal growth in this resale marketplace activity. And because of the sort of culture / stigma attached to it, the anonymity of the locker. So with this service, you send from a locker anonymously to another locker, and the person picks it up anonymously. The buyer doesn't know the seller doesn't know with the buyer. No shame is lost or made. And the transaction works extremely smoothly. So this is a locker-to-locker service.
That's incredible. So actually, culture can really, really affect. Because I've always said, and I still believe it, that sometimes people say to me, "We are not a locker market. We're not an out-of-home market." I believe every market is, but it's only a question of how much. Is it a majority out-of-home market or not? But this is really cool. So the culture has actually led to the fact that a whole sector of e-commerce, that being re-commerce, has become very, very important.
Yeah, I'm going to give you another example. In the UK, I don't know what it's like in Poland where you're sat, but we use deliver to neighbour quite a lot. If number 31 isn't in, can you take it to number 29? And as long as there's kind of a reciprocality, you don't even have to like the bloke. But if they will take your parcel in and you'll do it for them, and that's a decent way of dealing with an unsuccessful first attempt. I asked if that was common in Japan as well, and the guy just rolled his eyes and he said, I'm just thinking about what special box of cookies I would have to buy to take my neighbour to apologise for the huge inconvenience I'd made to his life if a delivery driver went to his apartment instead of mine. It is unconscionable that they would do that. And I was shocked, absolutely shocked.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what, Gary, you and I would have a problem, I think, living in Japan with our approach to various things. But you know what?
There's nothing nicer than picking through next door's e-commerce shopping, is there? Really? I mean, it's I want to know what brands are into. So it's a massive benefit as far as I'm concerned.
We won't go into too much detail here because this is getting on dangerous territory. But one thing you did mention, I think, that was really, really important. It's not about Japan, but I just got to highlight it. I think one of the reasons why out-of-home took a bit longer to develop in the UK was exactly what you said. Nowhere that I can think of has as strong lead with neighbour as the UK. It really works. It's done pretty well. Somebody told me that the best-in-class carrier at the time it was DPD was doing 99% first-time delivery because of lead with neighbour. So, of course, it takes away one of the main consumer advantages of lockers or PUDOs. The ecological and the cost thing is still there.
You've got to be really careful, though, because my father-in-law has just retired, and so he's at home quite a bit of the day, and all the couriers have realised he's at home all day and he's a decent chap. So sometimes you'll go to their house and the front hallway looks like a depot. He's got neighbours for neighbours all up and down the street. There might be a dozen, 15 parcels piled in the porch, waiting for people to come home from work and pick them up. So I think there's a limit to the neighbourliness of a Brit. To be fair, that's in Wales, not England. Maybe they're different.
But you know what? I mean, again, this is, I think for now we'll cut that topic, but as a point of interest, somewhere, I think it's in Holland, they have, I can't remember the name of it, but the idea is I have space. You have people who have a large apartment, they're on the ground floor. I know it works in Singapore. And actually, they make it a commercial business because they like to meet people. They do exactly what your dad does, but they actually get paid for it. So I think, it's developing all the time. What I personally, I don't know about you, Gary, but what I absolutely love about out of home is it's a living thing. It changes. What we saw together 5 or 6 years ago is now very, very different today. So let's watch this space. One thing, because the final thing, if you were to sort of share one, because you shared some really cool stuff on Japan, what would be the final thing that you'd leave us thinking about? Well, this is what's different about out of home in Japan. Is there anything else we didn't cover?
No, I just think that it is around this density question. We've touched on it on some of our other recordings, of why we're such advocates of density. When we had lockers just in key locations, the usage was like 10%, then it got to 30%. So you'd think if you go from 3,000 lockers to 7,000 lockers, the pool of parcels remains broadly the same. You're going to dilute the volume. The exact opposite happened. Usage rate went north of 60%, climbing towards 70%, because you've hit that sweet spot of hyper convenience. And this is why we kind of feel we have a right to comment here, is because we have got the largest fully agnostic network in the world, at maturity, sort of 7-8 years old now, and we've learned an awful lot of lessons. We have a ton of data. So whilst the Japanese market is amazingly different, it does show that lots of human behaviour is common, and we can use that experience in when we look at other markets.
Brilliant. I think it would be cool to come back to Japan again sometime. I'd challenge a little bit about the largest network, because many people suggest Hivebox is open, and it is in many ways, and that's a wee bit bigger, I suspect. But look, let's come back to Japan again, because it's super cool. Thank you for your insights, because it's a place I think a lot of people are interested in.
Thanks for watching this Last Mile Profits video. For more up-to-date last mile news and analysis, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn.